This is the loadout of an elite unit, and yet, almost everything you would expect them to have is simply not there. In the early 1970s, war began to change its shape. It no longer unfolded on front lines. It was no longer tanks facing tanks. It appeared in the middle of everyday life, on civilian aircraft, in theaters, at train stations, in city centers. Terrorist organizations of this period did not seek to defeat the state through conventional military force. They chose something far more effective. They created situations in which the state was not allowed to make a mistake. Hostages became shields. Civilian spaces became battlefields. And time, each minute passing under media cameras, became the most dangerous weapon of all. At that time, the Soviet Union possessed one of the most powerful military machines in the world. But against this kind of enemy, that power became almost useless. Overwhelming firepower turned into a threat to the very people it was meant to protect. Shock tactics no longer held their place. A single small mistake did not just cause casualties. It could trigger a national-level political crisis. That was when KGB Alpha Group was formed, not to fight wars, but to resolve situations where the military could not and was not allowed to appear. And it was in this period that a very unusual loadout emerged. Not because it was optimal, but because there was no safer alternative. So when firepower was no longer the answer, what actually decided success or failure? The answer did not lie in firepower. It lay in control. The Alpha Group loadout of this period was not designed to win quickly. It was designed to prevent situations from slipping out of control. And that is why every item they carried served a single purpose. Mistakes were not allowed. We begin with a primary weapon, not because it was the most modern, but because it shows most clearly how Alpha Group controlled space. Item 1. AKMS 7.62 by 39. We begin with the AKMS. In this loadout, the AKMS was not included to neutralize targets. It was included because the formation needed to control movement axes under conditions where early violence was not permitted and spatial tempo could not be allowed to drift freely. In corridors, stairwells, and transition points, the moment one direction is left open, control of the entire space behind it is immediately lost. The issue was not accuracy. It was preventing those axes from being crossed in the first place. The requirement placed on the operator was not to advance. It was to remain in position, keep the muzzle stable, and sustain pressure without breaking the existing control rhythm. In this role, the AKMS functioned as a fixed anchor point in space. Its presence defined movement boundaries, determined which directions could be approached and which had to be restrained. The folding stock allowed the operator to move and pivot in confined spaces without breaking the axis holding posture. This was especially important when continuous control had to be maintained across multiple overlapping access points. The 7.62 by 39 cartridge was not used for dominance. It existed to establish a clear consequence threshold, a level of risk high enough to prevent arbitrary attempts to cross a locked boundary. In this loadout, the AKMS was not meant to end situations faster. It forced the operator to hold position, maintain tempo, and preserve spatial order, instead of resolving the situation through impulsive action. That is why the AKMS was carried, not as an assault tool, but as the stabilizing foundation around which the entire control structure could operate. Item 2. Makarov PM 9x18. The Makarov PM was selected to provide control at very close distances where the AKMS became impractical. Its compact size allowed use in confined spaces, especially doorways, blind corners, and contact distance zones where a rifle became cumbersome. In this loadout, the PM did not replace the primary weapon. It existed as the final control option when distance and posture no longer allowed the AKMS to be used. The choice of the PM reflects Alpha's early priorities, not technological optimization, but simple, available, and reliable equipment that ensured continuous function of the formation. Item 3. Magazines, AK and PM. Ammunition was not carried to fire more. It was carried to avoid being pinned. Enough to maintain tempo, not enough to prolong engagement. Item 4. Breaching tools. Firefighting hooks. Crowbars. Not every door was allowed to remain closed. Mechanical tools allowed space to be opened without blowing it apart. Less noise, less risk, less loss of control. Item 5. KGB M69 Uniform. The uniform was not meant for concealment. It was meant to exist in public space, clearly identifiable, no camouflage, no ambiguity. Item 6. Brown leather belt. No vests, no complex load-bearing systems. The belt kept essential items exactly where they needed to be. No searching, no disruption. Item 7. Black leather boots. Not for speed, for stability. Balance during prolonged static positions. Stability while pivoting in confined spaces. Durable enough for continuous movement without breaking tempo. Not specialized, but they did not expose the loadout. Item 8. Fragmentation grenades. Not for initiation, not for clearing space. They existed to prevent the formation from being trapped when all other control options had ended. This was not a tactical choice. It was a mandatory termination option when space could no longer be held. Carried, but never intended to be used. Item 9. SSH-68 helmet. Not always worn. When required, it protected against unpredictable impacts. Item 10. PBS-1 suppressor. Not a default configuration. Used only when noise became a greater problem than firing itself. Item 11. Radio. Not always active, but when needed, it connected the forward space to everything behind it, enough to keep information from dying in place. Item 12. Wristwatch. Not to tell time, but to ensure actions happened at the correct moment. Item 13. First aid kit. Not to save lives in combat, only to ensure that minor injuries did not end an ongoing mission. At this stage, Alpha did not carry body armor and did not use weapon optics. Not because of doctrine, but because those systems were not yet suitable for inclusion in the loadout. Soviet personal armor was not standardized before the early 1980s. Weapon optics were still bulky and offered no clear advantage at close range. This loadout prioritized holding position, direct perception, and continuous control, rather than carrying equipment that had not yet matured technologically. This loadout was not built to win a battle. It was built to avoid creating a new crisis. Every item here was not meant to maximize firepower. It was meant to keep situations from slipping out of control, in moments when the state was not allowed to make mistakes. This was not displayed strength. This was restrained strength, present enough to impose order, yet limited enough to prevent the surrounding space from collapsing. That was how Alpha existed in its early phase, a loadout shaped not only by tactics, but by the political requirement of stability.